Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Chris Dombrowski, and I am GO-Biz Acting Director. Just want to start and obviously give a big thank you to all of you for your time, your communications, and your continued partnership with us. I also want to especially thank our federal partners who are joining us on today's webinar for their work, and another big thank you to our state partners at OPR and Strategic Growth Council for co-hosting this with us. As the state continues its ongoing efforts to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to ensure that you all are aware of what Governor Newsom's most recent announcements have been, and then also know all of our available resources. So this includes our weekly newsletter and our COVID-19 website that we are regularly updating. So we're well aware that your time is probably our most important commodity, so I'll be very quick here in our introduction. And if you have to drop off, please know that's okay. You can find a copy of this webinar on our YouTube channel, in our newsletter, on our website. Everything will be posted there for your viewing later. So earlier this week, Governor Newsom, alongside the California Department of Public Health Director and State Public Health Officer, Dr. Sonia Angel, laid out an update on California's roadmap to pandemic resilience, which discusses how the state is planning its path and phases forward. It's based on science, health, and data. As we continue to recover as fast as possible from the COVID-19 induced recession, we deeply appreciate your outreach, collaboration, and remain focused on ensuring our economy works for all Californians. Please continue to share these resources with your teams. Again, greatly appreciate all the partnership at this time and in the future. So please reach out to us with any concerns, questions you have. And again, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Traylon Bradley. Trey?
Thank you, Chris. Hi all, my name is Trey Bradley, and I'm a Senior Business Development Specialist here at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Thank you all for being here today. Today I'll be going over the agenda and a few notes for the webinar. We'll have a total of 9 presenting entities today, including GO-Biz here, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, California Strategic Growth Council, USDA, USSBA, EXIM Bank, US EDA, US EPA, and HUD. We are incredibly grateful to all of our presenters today for providing their time and sharing their information and resources. We will be introducing each presenter today as we proceed. Next slide. All recordings of our webinars will be posted on the website and YouTube channel. We will share these links widely for viewing and aim to work with our partners to disseminate the recording. We intend to also provide transcript or captioning with respect to videos and webinars that we post. Next slide. For today's webinar and future webinars, we ask that if you have any questions to please type them in the chat so we can save to respond with the correct answer, given the agency you are directing your question to. When we post the recording on YouTube, there will be a link provided at the bottom of the video. Next slide. Use the link provided to then enter a ticket system. This system will allow you to be paired directly with a staff so that we can work to connect with the proper contact or presenter to answer your question. All webinar recordings on YouTube will contain a link to the Zendesk site in the box below the video. We also will aggregate questions and responses into a single PDF to be posted with their coinciding video. Next slide. Following each live webinar, including this one, you will be directed to a survey. This survey is intended to get your feedback on both the content of the day as well as the activities of our offices broadly. We please ask that you fill it out. If you are unable after this time, we encourage you to do so later. In every recording, we will include the survey in the bottom alongside the question intake system. We want to hear from you. Next slide. We encourage staying connected. Our offices have Twitters, YouTube channels, and subscription lists for respective newsletters and information. These channels, like many agencies will share today, are the best for receiving immediate information and press releases. We also are posting all information online in publicly accessible places to ensure that information is readily and easily available. If you or your agency or department are having any issues accessing any of the information or using any of the links, we ask that you please reach out to us. Next slide. So what is the California Federal Partners for COVID-19? To provide background, GO-Biz, in partnership with the Office of Planning and Research and Strategic Growth Council, have been meeting weekly with many of our federal partners to share information and updates given new resources and funding during the time of COVID-19. Our offices were fortunate to be able to coordinate with our federal partners given OPR's role as a federal grants administrator, GO-Biz's work in local economic development liaison services with opportunity zones, and the Strategic Growth Council's multifaceted programs that support economic development while fostering inclusive and sustainable growth. Our collaboration has planned for a total of 4 webinars, with this being the second. The primary goal of this webinar series is to provide our collective networks of California communities, local governments, businesses, and economic development partners with up-to-date information on funding and resource opportunities in thinking about the present and the future in economic development in California. We would like to note that we are all learning every day together given this time. We ask that you share along this information to your agency staff and partners. With that, again, we are extremely thankful to have an array of folks here today together sharing updates, background, resources, and information. I would like to turn it over first to Scott Morgan, Chief Deputy Director at the Governor's Office of Planning and Research.
Trey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, I'm Scott Morgan with the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Going to do a really quick kind of high-level overview for everybody. We want to get on to our federal partners. And so going to be brief and primarily focused on our federal grants administrator role for the purposes of this group and this presentation. Next slide, please. So within OPR, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, we have kind of 3 large main budget programs. That includes planning and policy, which houses the State Clearinghouse, which coordinates California Environmental Quality Act and National Environmental Protection Act, review at the state level, and also houses the Federal Grants Administrator. We also have our planning and community development work that is around local city and county general plans, technical assistance to cities and counties on long-range development, and a variety of other land use and environmental policy work as well. Finally, in addition, under planning and policy, we have our integrated climate adaptation and resiliency program, really looking at climate adaptation and how we move forward here in California. We also have a variety of special projects and other statutory obligations related to higher education grant programs, precision medicine, and other projects as well that are statutorily provided to us or given to us directly by the Governor's Office. Our other large budget program is the Strategic Growth Council, and we have Louise Edwards on who's going to be next, Executive Director. We'll get into more detail on that. And finally, California Volunteers is the 3rd largest budget program, and they manage all the AmeriCorps programs and volunteerism here in California, and you may have heard about them in the news lately. A lot of work around COVID and volunteerism going on with them. Our director, Kate Gordon, is the director of the Office of Planning and Research. She's also a senior advisor to the governor on climate, as well as the chair of the Strategic Growth Council. So a broad range of things. And the planning and policy side, we try to stay within the land use planning and environmental worlds, but they'll get pretty expansive pretty quickly. So a lot of work that happens in OPR. Next slide, please. Some of our basic statutory mandates on the planning and policy side, again, we are dedicated or listed in statute as the state planning entity. We also are responsible for a lot of cross-agency coordination, development of land use and environmental policy of the state, and a variety of things related to state planning and coordination. We also have statutes that require us to develop the general plan guidelines and provide local assistance to cities and counties on long-range planning. Again, we have the State Clearinghouse, which coordinates CEQA and NEPA coordination, the ICAR, Integrated Climate Adaptation Resiliency Program, the Higher Education Grant for Precision Medicine. We also have a military affairs team that coordinates with the Governor's Military Council and works with branches of the armed services on land use and environmental coordination and compatible development, and a variety of other random programs. So again, a cross section that really touches all of the planning and land use work here in California. Next slide, please. So specific to this group, the State Clearinghouse was given the role of federal grant administrator through the bill. They were listed as Assembly Bill 1348. So this established the federal administrator role in State Clearinghouse. It's a variety of duties that are established there. One is tracking of all federal grants that are applied for, awarded, and funded in the state. So we have an annual report that comes out, it's available on our website, and we provide that to the governor and the legislature. And we're also required to help with technical assistance, providing information on the availability of federal grants here in the state, and that really ties into the work of this group with our federal partners, understanding all of the COVID-specific grant work, but also any kind of federal grants that are available at this time that state, locals, and other stakeholder groups here in California may apply for. So very important role to get that information out. We are also dedicated as the State Clearinghouse for federal grants underneath the intergovernmental review of programs, Executive Order 12372, and that really requires federal grants to be provided to the state for review and comment. And so we play that role of collecting the information on those federal grants. Specifically, the 424 forms are required to be submitted to our webpage. We do have an online submittal process that allows folks to register, input their 424 form, and also get information on all the grant applications that have gone into that database. So a good resource for understanding the amount of federal grants that come to California. Next slide, please. And so that's the end of my presentation. Again, this call really interested in coordinating on the federal grant side, understanding all the opportunities and getting those out to our state and local partners. I think now I'll be handing it over to Louise Bedworth, who is the Executive Director of the Strategic Growth Council.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Yes, this is Louise Bedsworth. I'm the Executive Director of the Strategic Growth Council. Next slide, please. The Strategic Growth Council was established just over 10 years ago to bring together a number of state agencies to support sustainable community development in California. Our vision is healthy, thriving, and resilient communities for all. And we do this through a number of collaborative efforts, working across all of our state agencies with communities and stakeholders to achieve sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. Next slide, please. The Strategic Growth Council is, in fact, a council. As Scott mentioned, we have a 10-member council chaired by the Director of the Office of Planning and Research. We also have 6 cabinet secretaries who sit on the council representing the Environmental Protection Agency, Natural Resources, Transportation, Health and Human Services, Business Consumer Services and Housing, and Food and Agriculture. And then we have 3 public members as well, one appointed by the Assembly, one by the Senate, and one by the Governor. Our council meets publicly 6 times per year, and we have an upcoming meeting in June of this year. We were to have one in April, which we have postponed because of the pandemic. We bring together a number of state agencies, both our member agencies, but we work more broadly across the state to basically coordinate activities that support sustainable community development. We center our work around strong economies, social equity, and environmental stewardship. We do our work through a number of means, but one of our primary activities is through a number of investment programs, which I'll spend a little bit more time walking through. Since 2014, we've invested over $1.5 billion in communities throughout California, both to support technical assistance and capacity building, but also a number of large-scale infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. The largest program that we operate is the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. And this is a program that brings together investment in affordable housing development and transportation and urban greening throughout the state. This year, we're in the middle of reviewing our current round of applications. We will award approximately $550 million through this program in June of 2020. Funding for this program comes from the state's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is revenues from the state's cap and trade program. And we receive a 20% continuous appropriation through that fund. So this is a steady source of funds that we operate on an annual scale. We release and work on guidelines for the program that are finalized in October of each year, and we make awards in June of each year, with applications for each round of awards due in February. The program is designed to be stable year to year so that we're able to support the development of pipeline projects. And so knowing that a lot of these developments take many years of planning, we look to establish a framework that can be predictable over time. We will be working on round 6 guidelines, and then, as I said, those will be developed through a public process this summer and finalized in the fall. Next slide, please. Another program that we operate is the Transformative Climate Communities Program, and this is established through statute in 2016, and it is designed to support our most disadvantaged communities in California by making neighborhood-scale, place-based investments. These are guided by a locally developed vision and strategy, and they fund integrated investments that achieve major environmental, health, and economic benefits. So this will include investments in workforce and economic development, as well as in infrastructure projects, including housing, transportation, transit, greening, and urban agriculture. We're in review for current round 3 of that program, and we'll be making awards in June. To date, we've supported 5 communities through this program. Often these, and also with the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities programs, these are often funding programs that are paired with and or leverage federal grants. So these are excellent opportunities for investing in communities throughout the state. Next slide, please. In addition to our investments in urban areas and in community development projects, we also support agricultural land conservation as something that goes hand in hand with building a sustainable California. And so we provide some portion of our Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities funding goes to support agricultural lands and protect them from development into more carbon intensive uses. So in many cases, these are investments that will protect ag land from conversion to urban uses to preserve food systems and open space around urban areas. Since we've conducted 5 rounds of this program to date, and we've protected over 90,000 acres of land in California. And we do this primarily through easements on land for the first time in this round, which is currently an open application process. We are also doing some direct acquisition of land, but typically we fund easements, which are the purchase of development rights from lands. We also support planning grants through this program, which support counties and other entities to do agricultural conservation planning at a jurisdictional scale. Next slide, please. Finally, we do a tremendous amount of technical assistance and capacity building, and we've done this through a number of mechanisms. First, we have a program that is dedicated to supporting access to funds through the California Climate Investments Program. So these are all of the funding programs that are funded through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that I mentioned earlier. And so in many cases, we will partner with other administering agencies to provide direct assistance to applicants to do capacity building and to support the integration across a number of funding programs. We also do technical assistance for all of our programs that we operate, again, providing pipeline development support for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, direct application assistance, and other activities. We also have a new program that we're implementing this year that is really focused on supporting community-led capacity building efforts. And so we are just getting that work underway, but we'll be launching a local leadership development program in the coming months that will be providing training and support for individuals in communities as a foundation for building community-based collaborative support that can engage in planning and investment activities at the community scale. Next slide, please. So that's an overview of a number of the programs that SGC provides, particularly on the funding side of things. I'd encourage you to visit our website to find out more information about any of our programs. You can also learn about a number of our policy initiatives that we have underway there, including our health and all policies work and some other partnerships that we have in place. But we're happy to answer any questions, and you can subscribe to our email lists through this website as well and get updates on our programs and other activities. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Luis. And then next we have Kim Van, State Director at the USDA.
And thank you, GO-Biz, for setting this up. This has been a great partnership with you all, and I've learned from you guys, and I hope you all have learned from us too. And it's great to have the audience with us today to share with you our programs that we have. I'm going to highlight programs that we have that can assist with recovery, and then outline our new resources to assist with this pandemic. Next slide, please. USDA has 7 mission areas, and as you can see at the bottom, there's rural development. And again, my name is Kim Van. I am the State Director of USDA Rural Development. Next slide, please. And you can also see our different regions. We have 4 regions with 47 state offices and 400 area offices, including U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Western Pacific Islands, our national offices in Washington, D.C., and in St. Louis. Next slide, please. One program area I'd like to highlight for all of you is our Community Facilities Program. This offers direct loans, loan guarantees, and grants to develop and improve essential public services and facilities in communities across rural America. These amenities help increase the competitiveness of rural communities in attracting and retaining businesses that provide employment and services for our community's residents. This program is very popular in California. We have a disaster allocation from our previous disasters, our camp fires and our car fires. So I would encourage all of you to look into that as well if you are affected by those disasters in your communities. We can do almost anything and everything under this program. We have the participants can be public bodies, nonprofit organizations, federally recognized tribes, and they can use these funds to construct, expand, or improve facilities. This is really the structural side of great assistance that we can give to our rural communities. And this program is for communities with a population of 20,000 or less. Next slide, please. Currently, we have a Rural Community Development Initiative grant open. I wanted to highlight this today because the grant does close on May 13th of 2020. This program can provide funding to help nonprofit housing and community development organizations support housing, community facilities, community and economic development projects in rural areas. We're basically training the trainers in this one. So who can apply for this one? It's public bodies, nonprofit organizations, and federally recognized tribes. So how can these funds be used? They can be used to improve community facilities and community and economic development projects in rural areas. The Rural Community Development Initiative grants may be used for, but are not limited to, training subgrantees to conduct home ownership education, provide technical assistance, strategic planning, and access to alternative funding sources, developing successful childcare facilities, creating training tools such as videos, workbooks, and reference guides. Again, you have to be in a rural area, which is a city or town that has a population of less than 50,000 inhabitants, and urban areas contiguous and adjacent to such cities or towns. Next slide, please. Again, this is an important program that we have open right now that I really wanted to highlight because I think this is extremely important in the environment we're in right now. This is the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant Program. This grant program can be used to purchase equipment and provide distance learning and telemedicine services, such as monitors, computers, switches, cameras, VTCs, and alike. This is a competitive grant program. There is a 15% match requirement, and it has to be a non-federal source. The minimum award amount under this one is $50,000, a maximum of $1 million, which changed this year. It rose it to $1 million. This NOFA closes on July 13th. We just had one other DLT period close on April 14th. I had 10 applications from California totaling close to $9 million. And applicants can be community colleges, hospitals, offices of education, K through 12, local health and human services, mental health, and alike. This is a really great program, and there's been some really creative ways that this has been used throughout the state. I would really encourage anybody who's interested in this to email us after this presentation. On my last slide, you'll see our email information. But I would really encourage anybody and everybody who's interested in this program to reach out to us as soon as possible. Next slide, please. We also have our business and industry loan guarantee. This program offers loan guarantees to rural businesses, and it's lender driven throughout the state. So who can qualify for these guaranteed loans? For-profit businesses, nonprofits, cooperatives, federally recognized tribes, and public bodies. These funds can be used to purchase and develop land, easements, right-of-ways, buildings, or facilities, purchase equipment, supplies, and inventory. We can also refinance when new jobs will be created and other conditions are met. You can also use these funds to acquire businesses and industries. And this program has a population cap of 50,000. Next slide, please. So a rural business and development grant. These applications are accepted on an annual basis, and right now this program just closed a couple weeks ago, but I really wanted to highlight this for our communities for the next round. This helps small and emerging private businesses and our nonprofits in rural communities, or even startups that are expanding. Applicants can be public bodies, government entities, nonprofit entities, and federally recognized tribe. There is no match on this. There is no maximum amount on this grant, but the average grant is about $100,000. Grants separated into enterprise or opportunities type activities such as training, technical assistance, revolving loan funds, feasibility studies, economic development projects, business incubators, strategic plans, and more. So I would really encourage everyone to keep an eye on this program for when we open it in the next round. Next slide, please. So moving on, those were all our programs that we offer on a regular basis. And now I'm going to highlight some of the things that we are doing in response to the COVID-19 situation. One thing I really want to highlight is our federal resource guide. You can see over on the right-hand side of the slide, there's a tab. And if you go to our website, www.rd.usda.gov/coronavirus, you'll see daily updates with stakeholder announcements and resources for rural lenders. There's also a question and answer section. And then our links to our USDA. This is the link to our USDA COVID website. Next slide, please. So our online COVID-19 resources continued. This Federal Rural Resource Guide is a one-stop shop of federal programs that can be used by rural communities impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This guide lists all federal funding and service resources for rural communities, businesses, healthcare facilities, and residents impacted by COVID-19. This guide will help our rural leaders, whether they be in local government, education, healthcare, faith-based leadership, or any other capacity, understand what federal assistance is available to them during this unprecedented time. And these aren't only USDA programs, but these are all of our federal resources. Next slide, please. So CARES Act implementation. In the CARES Act legislation, the Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program was given about $1 billion in lending authority under our BNI program. Repayment terms have been increased and options for deferrals. Operational expenses, including payrolls, salaries, benefits, as well as facilities costs, supplies, and inventories are eligible. The funding announcement for this increased appropriation is expected to come in late April. The second was our distance learning and telemedicine grant program that I mentioned earlier. There was an additional appropriation of $25 million for DLT grants. And again, I would encourage everyone to get on our website and look into this program. This window again for DLT closes on July 13th of 2020. And we're here to assist you in any way we can with those applications. Next slide, please. The CARES Act also, for our single family housing program and multifamily housing program, stated that lenders must provide immediate forbearance when requesting guaranteed loans for up to 180 days. Penalties and fees may not be charged to our single family home and multifamily home borrowers. Next slide, please. And how do you get in touch with us? You can see all our handles there. And you can see at the bottom there our email, ca.info@usda.gov. I just want to encourage anyone and everyone to reach out to us with questions. We're here to help. Our programs can be mostly matched with other federal resources and with all state resource funding. So when you are looking for your matches on some of these programs, we have a great team of people in the California office that can help you identify some of your matches as well and put your package together that you need. You know, don't be afraid to call and ask. I always tell people, don't try to memorize our programs and memorize our rules and regs, but call us, tell us what you want to do and what you need, and let us help you put that together. So thank you all very much. And again, thank you, Trey and GO-Biz for putting this all together today.
Great, thank you, Kim. And then next we have Terry Billups, who is the Associate Director of Economic Development at the SBA.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Terry Billups, and I am in the Los Angeles District Office. For those of you who aren't familiar with the U.S. Small Business Administration, we have offices across the U.S., so we have 68 district offices. In California, because of the population density, there are 6 district offices. So depending on where you're located, there should be one near you. Again, I'm in the Los Angeles office, and we cover Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Los Angeles counties. There are also offices in Orange County, and they also cover the Inland Empire. There's an office in Fresno, Sacramento, San Diego, and San Francisco. So as I present information today, you can reference the office nearest you if you need additional information, or you can always reach out to me and I can refer you to someone. So first, before I get into what SBA's COVID-19 response is, I'd like to just cover what our agency does on its mission, which has remained unchanged since 1953. The SBA is in existence to help small businesses start, grow, succeed, and recover. So the recover piece is where most of our COVID-19 activity has been. And you may or may not have heard that SBA also has resources that respond to disasters. So whether it's a wildfire, a hurricane, or in this case, a pandemic, our disaster response team is in effect, and they go into communities to help small businesses in the community recover. So unlike a normal disaster, which is either local or regional, this pandemic, as we all know, has affected every community across the nation. As such, SBA has special programming that resulted from the CARES Act that we are tasked to implement, which is funding related. But before I jump into that part, I just want to make everyone aware of what SBA does on a typical mission day outside of pandemic relief. So we have programs for loans which are still in full effect outside of the CARES Act. So everyone hears about the CARES Act and the loan programs that are a part of that. But outside of that, we still have our 7A and 504 loan programs, which are still in full effect. So for those of you who, hear things in the media that, there's not funding available, just remember that 7A and 504 loans are still there outside of the pandemic and the response to that. In addition, we help small businesses with their entry into government contracting programs. So again, that's a service that our offices provide. So if that's something of interest to you, we can help you get the information you need to learn more about government contracting. And if you qualify, you could apply for our 8A government contracting program. In addition, we also have a network of partners that provide counseling services. So outside of the district offices that I mentioned, we also have a network of small business development centers, and you'll hear them called SBDCs. You'll hear women's business centers or WBCs. And we also have a network of SCORE mentors, and SCORE stands for Service Corps of Retired Executives. All of these resources are available at a local level. So again, depending on where in the state you are, you can go to sba.gov/local assistance, and you can find the resources that are nearest to you. The other thing that I would like to mention is the resources that SBA provides are provided at no cost. So because we're funded by tax dollars, our services are provided free. So that's something that, certainly you should consider in terms of trying to get support for your business, whether it's that SCORE mentor, someone just to give you some business support, whether it's our small business development center and you want to go sit with a counselor and talk about something specifically, or prepare for that loan package before you go to the bank to make sure that you're presenting the best case for your business. Those are all services that SBA can help you with. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as part of the CARES Act, SBA and the Department of Treasury have been tasked to deploy money by the way of loans, and some of them are forgivable. So you'll hear the word grant. SBA doesn't like the word grant just because typically we don't offer grants. So we like the word forgivable, which means that the loans that you get, if you meet the criteria and follow the process, they are eligible for forgiveness, at least the Paycheck Protection Program is. So you'll hear PPP, that stands for Paycheck Protection Program, and that's one of the programs that SBA is helping to provide small businesses with funding by way of forgivable loans. The other program you'll hear is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance. So EIDL and EIDL-A is the same application process, and all of them you start the same, which is to go to sba.gov, and then there's a banner across the top of the page that says COVID-19. It's bright yellow, and if you click that, then that will take you to a landing page that shows you the funding options as part of the CARES Act. And you'll see PPP, you'll see the EIDL loan advance, you'll see the SBA Express Bridge loan, which also is a different program, allowing businesses to get $25,000 loans. And then there's also an SBA debt relief tab. So if you already have an SBA 7A or 504 loan, SBA is offering debt relief. And what that means is if you meet the criteria, SBA will pay 6 months of your principal, interest, and associated fees for a 7A, 504, or a micro loan. So go to our webpage and click on that tab if that applies to you, because again, having 6 months to help you recover from the pandemic can make a tremendous difference. So on the Paycheck Protection, if you were to click that, it will give you an application, which is very short, and you take that application, you complete it, and then you will have to work with a lender. So the PPP program is different in that way that for PPP, you work directly with a lender, and the lender will actually be dispersing funds to you if you get the PPP loan. Whereas on the EIDL side, that is a loan directly with SBA. So completely different process. PPP, you're working with a bank or another entity that lends. And EIDL, you're working directly with SBA. So if either of these apply to you, I encourage you to go to the website and get your process started. I will tell you that the EIDL process right now is on hold. We anticipate that the portal will reopen soon. On the Paycheck Protection side, as you probably have heard from social media or the media, there is still funding available that was made available by the second round of funding from Congress. So get with a lender and go ahead and apply. There is a way to find a lender. So if you go to your bank, which should be your first stop, and you find that they're not accepting applications or they don't have the ability to process your loan, then you can go to our resource page and put in www.sba.gov/paycheck protection/find/find, and that gives you the ability to find a lender based on your zip code. So again, you can apply for both EIDL or PPP. EIDL portal not open yet. PPP, they are taking applications. So try to identify a lender. If you have any challenges with applying for either of these programs, I encourage you to reach out to our district office. For PPP, that is a 2-year term and a 1% interest rate, and that is forgivable if you meet the criteria. So that converts into a forgivable loan if you meet the criteria for it. Whereas EIDL, that is a loan, and the interest rate on that is 3.75 for small business and 2.75 for nonprofit or faith-based organizations. So once the portal for EIDL opens, that can be applied for. You can also apply for PPP. There's nothing that prohibits you from applying for both programs. Think of the EIDL loan use of proceeds as working capital for any expenses that your business would have incurred had it not been for the pandemic. And then on the PPP side of things, that loan has to be used for gross payroll, and you're allowed to get 25% of the loan for operating expenses, which are limited to rent expense, mortgage interest, and some operating costs. So make sure that you go to our website and educate yourself on both programs and select the one that fits best for what your situation is. If you're in need of accessing both programs, fill out the application when the EIDL portal opens for EIDL. And then there's an advance portion of that as well. If you check the box in the application that you want the advance, you can get up to a $10,000 forgivable piece, and it's $1,000 per employee. So if you have 5 employees, you can get an advance of $5,000. If you have 20 employees, it's still capped at $10,000. So remember that on the EIDL side. And then remember on the PPP side that that is forgivable if you meet the criteria, and you need to work with your lender directly on that once you get your application in. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our office in LA at lado@sba.gov. Again, it's LADO, which is Los Angeles District Office, at sba.gov. And submit your question, put in the subject line today's call, and we will answer any questions that you have. I wish everyone good health and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And then next we have Sandra Donzella from Deputy Managing Director for the Western Region at EXIM Bank.
Thank you, Trilyn. Again, this is Sandra Donzella. I'm a member of the Western Regional Office of EXIM Bank. I'm based in San Diego, and together with 2 colleagues, Paul Duncan and Greg Moore, who are based in Irvine, we cover 11 Western states for EXIM Bank, including our beautiful state of California. For those of you that are not, next slide please. For those of you that are not familiar with EXIM Bank, we are the official export credit agency of the U.S. government. So we are not a bank. We also do not provide resources to support imports into the United States. Our mission is strictly to support U.S. exports. And the underlying reason we provide this is to help create and sustain U.S. jobs. We have a long history since 1934. So we were created in the midst of the Depression. So our programs have always been well positioned to provide assistance in times of crisis. Our headquarters are in Washington, D.C. That's where all of the credit decision takes place. And we also have a network of regional offices throughout the country, 12. And again, I'm part of that field office network. And our role in the regional offices is to do outreach and business development. We work with businesses of all sizes, small, medium, and large, but we're very proud of the strong support that we consistently provide to small businesses, which typically account for about 90% of the transaction volume that we're asked to support in a given year. So no company and no transaction are too small for EXIM. We can support exports worldwide to over 180 countries, but in some markets we have restrictions, and in certain countries we are closed due to political reasons. So knowing where the buyer's located can be an important consideration. And we are somewhat limited in our ability to work with early stage businesses, and that's because our charter requires EXIM to make sure that for every transaction that we're asked to support, that there be reasonable reassurance of repayment. So businesses that lack a 3-year history typically are not eligible, although we do have quite a bit of flexibility under our short-term insurance program, where we can usually approve a request for businesses that have just 1 year, as long as they produce sales. Next slide, please. So we're on the third slide now. Short-term insurance represents EXIM Bank's most demanded program by small business. And that's because inevitably most companies that are engaged in exporting will inevitably need it. And that's due to many buyers abroad expecting flexible and competitive repayment terms when they are making purchases. And if exporters want to be able to compete and capture growth opportunities internationally, chances are they will need insurance. It's a very simple concept. It applies when the exporter makes a shipment, invoices the buyer, and gives them typically 30 or 60 days, or it could be more days to make the payment. And that exposes the exporter, because what happens if there's non-payment? Well, that's when our insurance program can be very valuable and beneficial. It offers risk protection in the event of non-payment by the foreign buyer due to commercial or political reasons. So for example, if a foreign buyer doesn't pay because they go bankrupt or they are insolvent, or perhaps this impact of COVID-19, which is impacting businesses here and abroad, results in lack of cash flow, then those are type of risks that EXIM Bank would cover under commercial loss category. We also cover political risks such as civil unrest, riots, war, revolution, foreign exchange restrictions, or the cancellation of the buyer's import license. And we cover most of the risk, 90, 95, or 98% of the invoiced amount. So the intent is to help businesses minimize the risk so that they can offer competitive and flexible repayment terms and win more business. So this program can be a powerful sales tool for exporters. It can also be used for financing purposes, and that's because most lenders will finance foreign receivables, but typically only if they are insured. So it's even though this is insurance, it helps exporters address lack of liquidity when they're extending credit internationally. In terms of the COVID-19 measures that we have taken under this program, we've taken several steps. For example, we are streamlining the policy renewal process, so there's no lapse in cover. We're approving them as fast as we can with as little information as needed. We also extending the due date on premium payments when exporters are not able to pay them. We also offering deadline extensions on claim filings and more flexibility in terms of the documentation in processing claims. And we also, if needed, extending claim filing deadlines. Next slide, please. In addition to insurance, another popular program with small businesses is EXIM Bank's Working Capital Guarantee Program. And this is similar to our friends at the SBA. This is a program offered through a network of commercial lenders that participate, and our role is that of a guarantor. We can guarantee the repayment of a working capital loan that is supporting export activity. The use of the proceeds can be used to cover manufacturing costs or to pay for the purchase of the items that will be exported. It can be used, for example, to make payroll if it's associated with export activity, etc. And it can be offered to support both direct and indirect exports. So for example, if a business exports, say, aircraft parts to Boeing, and Boeing exports over 50% of their planes, that would be considered an indirect export. Or it could be a farmer that sells grapes to a packer that in turn does the exporting. That also is an indirect export and could be supported under this program. We recently have reduced the fees. We used to have somewhat of a complicated fee arrangement. Now we're only charging a flat 0.25% per year fee for loans up to $2 million. And in terms of the measures taken by EXIM Bank under this particular program to help our exporters, we have allowed for a temporary extension of the borrowing base. So for example, before we could only support advances against export-related inventory, meaning it was backed by a firm purchase order from a buyer abroad. And now we are allowing the exporter to borrow on inventory that may not necessarily be allocated to be exported, but has the potential to be sold abroad. We're also waiving program requirements when they're difficult to meet and providing due date extensions. And then the last slide, please. And in terms of additional measures that EXIM has taken to support the exporting community, back in March, we issue a press release where we outline all the provisions and flexibility associated with our short-term portfolio, short-term being what I just covered, insurance, as well as working capital guarantee. We also implemented measures by creating temporary programs that address the lack of liquidity of foreign buyers abroad, and those are associated to help EXIM Bank's long-term portfolio, meaning it's really more applicable for exports of big-ticket capital equipment, where there's a lot of customization and a long manufacturing cycle. And it's designed, the one, for example, is the bridge financing program. This is something EXIM typically does not do, but if a foreign buyer can't find financing, we are willing to provide a guarantee or repayment to a bank to provide that buyer a one-year loan with the option to extend it for another year if needed. We're also providing temporary assistance under a pre-export payment program, and that is used to address the need of exporters for progress payments, so they have access to liquidity to manufacture big ticket items. It could be, for example, satellites, big turbines, etc. And then we have expanded our supply chain financing program. That's a product that helps suppliers to exporters get paid in a matter of days, while the exporter has the ability to stretch their payables and address their own liquidity needs as well. More details about all of these measures are available right on our homepage. We have dedicated a section that outlines all of our measures to address this virus. And the first slide had my contact information as well as that of my colleagues, so feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And next we have Melinda Matson, who is the Economic Development Representative at the USDA.
Okay, seem to be having some technical difficulties. I'm hoping this works. So the Economic Development Administration is a fairly small agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce. We have 2 permanent staff here in the state, and that includes my colleague Will Marshall, who covers Southern California and the Central Valley, and myself, Melinda Matson, and I cover Northern California, coastal California from Monterey North, and the Sierras to the east. Next slide, please. So what we do, so we are the only federal agency totally committed to economic development. And we have used a bottom-up, locally driven approach for more than 50 years. We will be looking for projects that address the impacts of COVID-19 that have had on the local and regional economies, and that help those economies grow and recover. We were provided $1.5 billion in the CARES Act, and we are waiting any day now for the Notice of Funding Opportunity to be released. When it does, you can find that at the what we call PWIA 2020. It stands for Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance on grants.gov. So that's an existing NOFO that we're expecting to be amended to cover the CARES Act funding. So you can go today to grants.gov and look at that, and you can see the current NOFO, and you can look at all of the application packages to get a sense of the kind of information that we're going to want for different types of applications. And these are grants, not loans. And we'll be having more information about grant rate, which I expect will start at 80% and maybe go to 100%, which means that the match would have to be either 20% or lower. So next slide, please. Thank you. So examples of some of the projects that we can do with EDA grants. First one there, capitalization or recapitalization of revolving loan funds. And this is to improve access to capital. These are for businesses that maybe aren't ready for SBA or aren't ready for bank loans, so maybe higher risk businesses. We can also fund all kinds of recovery strategies or marketing strategies that help address the impacts that have been caused by the coronavirus pandemic. So if you're a region that's dependent upon tourism, you might need some support in helping you develop new strategies for how you're going to cope for the next year, 2 years, 3 years until things return to normal, or we figure out what a new normal is. And these can also be regular recovery strategies that address a variety of issues within your local economy or regional economy. We can also fund the implementation or expansion of entrepreneurial support programs. These can be to help diversify your economy, to make it more resilient, or to strengthen industry sectors. So this can range from like business incubators or helping existing businesses improve their business operations. So that's another opportunity. And then the last thing, well, it's not the last thing, these are just examples, but the other thing that, and we're probably best known for, is construction of critical infrastructure. So broadband is probably the thing I've heard most in inquiries here about this, but we can also do your typical water, sewer, roads, business incubators, workforce development centers, things like that. So it's probably a good idea before the NOFO comes out to be thinking about what the biggest needs are in your community and to start looking at those application packages and to see what kind of projects you want to get funding for. So just as a reminder, our eligible applicants, so it's state and local governments, and that's any kind of local government, counties, incorporated cities, special districts, JPAs, COGs, any of those, and I'm sure there's more out there. Also nonprofit organizations. Now, these have to be working in cooperation with a element of local government, and we will need to see proof of that. So a letter of support that explains what that cooperation is. Institutions of higher education are eligible, as are all Native American governments. Next slide, please. So again, here's our contact information. And feel free when the NOFO comes out or even before to reach out to Will or I to discuss what you want to do. Maybe, you know, pose some projects to us. That's what we're here for. Under normal circumstances, we would love to come out and sit down with you and visit you, visit sites, get to know your community better. We know many of you already and have had long partnerships with you. We expect to increase the number of those partnerships with this additional money. Unfortunately, for the time being, we won't be able to meet in public, or in person, but we're available for phone calls and lots of emails. You can also visit our website, which is basically eda.gov. You can find our programs, you can find funding opportunities, and when our NOFO is published, which is again, hopefully any day now, you'll be able to find some additional information and resources about that. They just haven't unveiled that yet. And lastly, I want to share we have regional economic development integrators. Ours here for the West Coast is Frances Sakaguchi. She provides assistance when a number of federal agencies are working together to try to solve a particular issue. She helps us leverage funding and work out challenges, entanglements. So that's basically it. Again, we're just waiting for that to come out. Note our email addresses, phone numbers here, and we expect lots and lots of calls once that's finally announced. So thank you, and I hope to hear from a lot of you soon.
Thank you, Melinda. And then next we have Eric Bias, who's going to go over for the EPA and the TA and Brownfields assistance part.
Great. Great. Thank you all for your time today. And thanks, Trey and GO-Biz, for coordinating this webinar. I'm going to discuss United States Environmental Protection Agency's Brownfields Program resources. There are also some Brownfields Program resources available through Department of Toxic Substances Control in California, but I'm going to focus on the federal resources that we have today. And I understand that you all have a lot of immediate challenges and concerns that aren't related to redevelopment of blighted properties right now, but with this quick briefing, my goal is just to help you keep our brownfield resources in mind for when the redevelopment opportunities do end up presenting themselves, and they'll probably present themselves in different ways in different areas of the state. So I wanted to, how about next slide? Our program, provides a really substantial amount of grant funding and technical resources for all of these different steps of brownfield redevelopment. And I want to note right now what a brownfield actually is, because there's a lot of times a lot of misconception about what it is. It's a very open definition, and it's basically any site or a property that's not being redeveloped due to existing or perceived contamination. So this includes nearly all blighted properties. Some folks think that, well, if it's not on a list, then it's not on a brownfield. It's not a brownfield officially, but just about any property that you have that's not being developed because there may be contamination or there might not be, that does qualify as a brownfield. Our funding hits this whole spectrum of site redevelopment, from conducting environmental site assessments to determine whether or not cleanup is needed at a site, to determine the presence or absence of contamination. And in about a third of the sites that are assessed with our programs, there is no contamination and development can proceed. We also have funding for cleanup planning if it's needed, cleaning up a site, all types of remedial activities that needed to be done. And we also have funding for area and community-wide development planning that would support a brownfield redevelopment. And if I could go to the next slide, please. And here's a summary of all of our programs. And of course, I don't have time today to go into them with extensive detail. But we have assessment grants that conduct environmental site assessments and do cleanup planning. We have cleanup grants that provide funding for remediation, also remediation planning. We have multi-purpose grants, which is one grant that covers both assessment and cleanup activities. We have revolving loan fund grants. We have environmental workforce job training grants. All of those highlighted in blue are grants under our competitive program. The two in the bottom in white, those are our non-competitive programs, and we have a state and tribal response program, and we have a targeted brownfield assessment program, which is basically an EPA contractor that conducts environmental assessments on behalf of a community. Next slide, please. This is a funding matrix that we've put together. It was actually just updated this month, so it's all very current and accurate, and it's a fact sheet that accompanied or will accompany the materials for this webinar, which gives all the details for our various programs. And you could see about halfway down, a little more than halfway down, the funding that's available for each of these programs. So you can see there's quite a bit available. And I want to identify with this that a site is defined by the applicant. It's not defined as a parcel or a group of parcels. So if there's different processes within a given site, each of those can be sites that receive funding in the amount that you see on that line. From $600,000 for assessment, $500,000 for cleanup. There's $800,000 available for multi-purpose grants, up to $1 million for revolving loan funds, and there's $200,000 available for workforce development. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like just to give a few examples of where brownfield funding has supported redevelopment projects in areas that are a priority for California, both in the past, currently, through this COVID-19 crisis, and then, of course, after this crisis. This first slide here talks about, this is on the left is before the sites were assessed and cleaned up, and of course on the right are after cleanup. And I put this in there just to highlight what I mentioned in the beginning is, sometimes redevelopment opportunities present themselves when you least expect it. So if you had in mind properties that do have old buildings, that do have dilapidated structures that need to be assessed for various contaminants and then maybe cleaned up and removed. So when economic opportunities present themselves, the site can be ready to move forward. So that's something that I'd like to keep in everyone's mind. Just if there are old properties rather out there with old buildings and whatnot that can be addressed in the meantime, please keep those in mind and give me a call to see if our funding might be appropriate for those. Some other types of projects, next slide please, is affordable housing projects that we've done. Transportation related construction projects, both for mass transit type activities, but also for dwellings near stations. And then on the bottom, you could see an idea that we're strongly pushing now is electric vehicle charging at old gas stations, given the need both for climate concerns and for transportation concerns within the state, that there's a lot of opportunities there to turn old gas stations into electric vehicle charging stations. Also, given this COVID-19 crisis, the need for rural and tribal health facilities and clinics are critical. And then, of course, parks are always important, and having open space for people to enjoy themselves and get out of this confinement. If something like this ever happens in the future, these are all ideas of where brownfields has been effectively used to transform the property from a blighted site to a jewel of the community. So last slide, I just wanted to highlight that our grants come out every year, and the successful applicants for this year's grants will be announced in May, and next year's solicitation will come out in September or October. We actively leverage our funding with all the other grant program, any other grant program you can think of that's useful for you and helpful to you and matches your redevelopment needs, and we'll actively coordinate with those other agencies and programs to see to see how we can most effectively apply our funding to help meet your goals. Please do give us a call. My contact information is in the beginning of this presentation, but also on the fact sheet, as well as the contact information for the rest of my team. And I did want to quickly mention that just today, there was funding announced in another program, in our environmental justice program, to support environmental justice communities that are impacted by COVID-19. It's not as much funding as we have available each year, but it's $1 million across the country that's available for a $200,000 max award. And it's states, tribes, and local governments are eligible for it. So you can look that up on grants.gov and see if that's applicable to your community. But as I mentioned, it's $1 million available across the country. So thank you very much again for your time today, and I hope you all stay safe out there.
Thank you, Eric. And then next we have Eric Yost with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Eric?
Thank you, Trey. As Trey mentioned, I work at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Office of Field Policy and Management in the Los Angeles Field Office. My role as a management analyst for community initiatives is to build and strengthen public-private partnerships to assist communities in California, working collaboratively with our federal partner agencies to align and target our federal resources for comprehensive neighborhood revitalization and to assist residents. This includes leveraging many of the White House, HUD, and HUD secretarial initiatives, such as our place-based work with opportunity zones, promise zones, and vision centers, along with our efforts with HUD Section 3, affordable housing creation and preservation, homelessness, and our Foster Youth to Independence initiative. HUD is the lead federal agency for the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, focused on aligning and targeting federal grants and programs and helping ecosystems for opportunity zones. To date, the council has aligned 273 federal grants and programs that offer opportunity zone benefits. HUD's FPM team is available to assist state and local government elected officials and staff, communities and community-based organizations, and residents throughout California. I am representing a committed team of HUD staff and leaders to share information about HUD's resources to address the COVID-19 crisis and to assist with recovery efforts. HUD's FPM staff are knowledgeable about all of HUD's grants and programs, as well as have knowledge about grants and programs from our fellow federal agencies. We are honored to participate with the other federal agencies and their staff on this webinar today. Next slide. HUD has partnered with the California Governor's Office on many important initiatives for California. Many thanks to the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GO-Biz, for our continued collaboration responding to the current pandemic. HUD's mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. Our 5-year strategic framework directs us to advance economic opportunity, including bolstering growth in opportunity zones. Our partnership with GO-Biz was initially established to assist with the 879 opportunity zones in California. This partnership allowed us to quickly realign our efforts to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Our relationships with the other federal agencies on this webinar through our opportunity zone work also provided us with the ability to quickly transition our work to address this pandemic. Many think of HUD as only housing, but HUD also has an "and" to focus on urban development. The Department of Housing and Urban Development Act of 1965 compels our HUD staff to promote the growth of cities and states and the efficient and effective use of housing and community and economic development resources by stimulating private sector initiatives, public-private sector partnerships, and public entrepreneurship. It also compels our team to work with other federal agencies and share information about other federal agency resources. In California, we have 3 office locations. Santa Ana is home to the Santa Ana Field Office and the Home Ownership Center for HUD's FHA single-family work. The Los Angeles Field Office is the largest field office in the country for HUD that covers 12 Southern California counties with over 160 staff. The HUD LA Field Office program staff includes those in community planning and development, public and Indian housing, multifamily, policy research and development, fair housing and equal opportunity, and others, along with my department, the Office of Field Policy and Management. The San Francisco Regional Office is home to our leadership for Region 9 that covers California, Arizona, Nevada, and Hawaii, along with Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. The regional office not only includes staff supporting our region, but also staff covering the 46 counties in Central and Northern California. Chris Patterson is HUD's Region 9 Regional Administrator. 2 key websites are provided here, along with key links to a booklet of all of HUD's programs and a link to our HUD's 5-year strategic plan that covers our priorities along with our goals, strategic objectives, and activities. Finally, if you would like additional information to be emailed to you, I provided 3 links. The first link is to sign up for HUD's official press releases and newsletters. The second provides you with a website to sign up for a variety of HUD-specific newsletters. And lastly, the final link provides you with a list of HUD California-specific newsletters you can sign up to receive. Next slide, please. Here's a structure of HUD with a highlight of the Office of Field Policy and Management. Next. Our HUD website contains a specific landing page for our HUD COVID-19 resources. I have provided a listing for each unique COVID-19 resource page. HUD is also publishing highlights of stories of communities coming together to help their neighbors during the COVID-19 crisis. That includes many highlights of activities in California. To date, HUD has published stories about educators, public housing authorities, faith-based organizations, businesses in opportunity zones, and special care for the homeless that have helped others during the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide. The CARES Act provided $17.8 billion in funding to HUD, with the largest portion, $5 billion, for our Community Development Block Grant Program, followed by $4 billion for homeless assistance grants. Next slide, please. The first release of funding to HUD was focused on $2 billion to help states, communities, and nonprofits, $1 billion to keep America's homeless citizens safe, and $63.7 million to help Americans with compromised immune systems. It also focused on cutting the red tape to allow targeting of HUD's COVID-19 response through waivers and of administrative provisions for funding. For the initial funding to states, I have provided a listing of the various uses of these funds to address the pandemic. The $2 billion is being allocated under HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program. I have provided a link to the specific state and grantee, counties and cities, and their respective allocations on this slide. Next slide. For HUD's $5 billion in CARES Act CDBG funding, I wanted to provide the current allocation of funding timeline. The order of funding is as follows: appropriations, fund allocation, funds reservation, and lastly, funds awarded. Currently, we are in the allocation period, and CDBG CV funds have not been distributed yet. However, grantees have been authorized to incur pre-award costs against their CDBG CARES Act funding allocations. On April 2nd, 2020, $2 billion was allocated for the first round of CARES Act HUD CDBG coronavirus funds. These funds were allocated based off the existing fiscal year 2020 formula and given to entitlement cities, counties, and directly to states. By May 11th, 2020, the second round of CARES Act CDBG coronavirus funding formula allocations will be announced, totaling $1 billion that will be given to states and insular areas. The funding allocation for round 2 will be based on a new to-be-determined formula based on need and impact of COVID-19. Finally, the remaining $2 billion in CARES Act CDBG coronavirus funding will be made available on a rolling basis under a new to-be-determined formula that will be based on needs and at the discretion of HUD Secretary. Our HUD FPM team has prepared an impact video with GO-Biz to share more details about CDBG funding. Please ensure you are signed up for the GO-Biz newsletter to receive access to this impact video. In addition, HUD has 2 key documents that we've prepared: a CDBG Economic Development Toolkit and a CDBG Micro Entrepreneurs Assistance Toolkit. In the Economic Development Toolkit includes chapters for small business development, large-scale commercial development, infrastructure, and economic development strategies. For the first round of CARES Act CDBG coronavirus funding, California received approximately $235.3 million, or 11.8% of the $2 billion of CDBG coronavirus funding from round 1. I have also listed the amounts allocated to cities, counties, and to the state for the first round of CDBG coronavirus funding. One eligible activity is for assistance to businesses, including special economic development assistance. But it is important to understand all the nuance and regulations for this funding. In California, there are currently 163 entitlement cities that received this round of funding. At the bottom of the slide is included a link to HUD's website that includes 2 Excel files: the fiscal year 2020 CDBG funding and the CARES Act Round 1 funding that is allocated to each city, county, and to California. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Eric. Next slide. For all of you who are here today, we thank you for attending and we thank you to our presenters. With that, in closing, we want to note that if you have any questions, to please use the Zendesk ticket system provided with the link inside the recorded video. The recorded video will have a section table of contents broken down so you can jump to presenter within the YouTube video. And we encourage once we post that YouTube video today that you share it with those who may have missed the live webinar. Any new idea or thing that you learned, we also encourage you to share it to communities, businesses, and your partners. Information sharing relative to many of the topics shared today is critical in this time. Next slide. And if you missed it, make sure to also catch last week's webinar where we posted on navigating federal funding in a time of COVID, featuring just now Eric, and then Amy Miller at OPR and the Grants Republic team. You can find it on our YouTube and on business.ca.gov on the coronavirus page. Next slide. Finally, thank you for joining us for our second weekly webinar, California Federal Partners for COVID-19. We thank you all for your time today. We thank the presenters here for taking the time to share this critical information. We look forward to you all joining for our next week's webinar, and we hope to see you then. Thank you.